Hey everyone, welcome back to learning to program using the Godot game programming engine. Alright, in this video we're going to take a look at something called visual scripting. And this is a way let's get this set up real quick before we talk about it too much. So we're going to do Guess My Number again. And we'll call it VS for visual scripting. So we're going to recreate that, basically the same game we did before, and this time we're going to go user interface, and so this is Godot 3.1, but most of this should still be the same. I'm going to do a couple controls here. I'm going to do a label for my header, so I'll go ahead and call that header label, and I'll do another control for the result. Oops. Label, and I'm going to call that result label. And finally, I'll do a text box, text edit, and that will be my input. Alright, so I'm going to go back to these guys and add some text. So this will be guess a number between 1 and 10. And I will change the rectangle and the scale to about 3. Make it nice and big. And then let's go to the result label. And we'll change the rectangle scale on that one to about 2. And we'll say your guess result will go right here. And let's see. It's probably fine right there in the middle, or actually we'll put it off here. And there's our text box for the input. We need one more control. We need the button. Alright, so here's our button, and let's set the text to that to be make guess, and we'll just make our button a little bit bigger. And the placement doesn't really matter. You can adjust that however you like to your taste. I'm going to put 5 in there because that's a really good starting number guess. If you really wanted to make this look better, you could add custom fonts to all this, and that would help a lot with the visual appeal of the game, but we'll just continue from here. So before, we added a script up here, and when we did that we used the default, which is GDScript. But now we're going to use something called VisualScript. You notice it changed the extension here, and I didn't rename this, but that's okay because this is going to be a very simple page, or simple game that just uses one page. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and save my scene, so I hit Control S to save, and I'll just save that. And that's my scene right there, and there's my script right there. Alright, so here's the visual scripting window. And there's a few main parts. You'll still use the inspector a lot. We'll see that in a second. So up here is the different scripts you've got going on. I'm going to shrink that a little bit to give us more space down here. Here's the type of script this is. So this is on a user interface element right there. If you had a node, for instance, or a node 2D, that's how you would change to a node TD. Also, if you had a kinematic body, like that. So anyways, that's the type of node that it's coming from. So you shouldn't need to change that. It's just whichever type of node that you attach the script to. Okay, next we have the members. So this is where you'll have all of your functions, your variables, and signals. And these are not signals like the button click. These are signals that your control would send out. So I don't think we've looked at that much yet, but that is something you could add right there. And then finally you've got down here, these are the available nodes. Now these are not these nodes up here, these are nodes that'll be over here in our graph, and we'll see that in just a second. So to make this game, the way this game works is when the game starts up, it generates a random number and then hides it in the system, in the game, and then when you click the guess button, it compares this number to that hidden number and then tells you if you're too high, too low, or you got the guess correct. So we're going to jump back into our script and we're going to start working on it. So the first thing we need to do is set up our random number that gets saved when the game starts. And so there's two buttons here. There's one that this one adds just your own functions, and then this one will override functions that are already there. So the ready function is already there, and so that's what that one is. So your let's see, process would be in here, physics process, and ready are all functions that are you get to by clicking that button. Okay, so this is ready function, and so what we want to do is we want to do the random, we need to call the randomize, and that sets up your random number. So the way you connect nodes, so I just created a node by dragging it out and putting it into the editor here, and the way you connect these nodes is by dragging on the arrow and then dropping it on the target. So this arrow is your kind of like code process. So you can kind of think of this as the first line, then this would be the second line, and then if I had another one out here, that would be the third line. Alright, so we've got the randomize. So now our randomizer is set up. Now the next one is this random, and what that'll do is it'll create a random range by default. And you can also, if you come over to the inspector, you can see all the other math functions. And there's that rand_i that I believe we used in one of the first tutorials. But the random range is pretty nice because it will give us a number between two other numbers. But it gives it to us in a type float, so we're going to have to convert that. Now you notice this one doesn't have an arrow on it. That's because this is this just takes some values and generates a value. So what we're going to do is we need to set a value. We're going to take this number that gets generated from this and then store it into a variable. So let's go ahead and make the variable, and you do that by clicking the plus sign next to variables, and then you can give it a name. So we're going to call it my number, and currently it's of type any, which is variant, and it's set to null. So I can edit it by right clicking and then hit edit member, and then I can change the type. So I want it to be an integer because it's a whole number, and you can even set the value. So we'll just leave it on 0. You can also set it to export, so that would show it here in your designer up here. And then if I edit it and disable that, it takes it away. So anyways, that's kind of nice. We've looked at that in some of the other, like in the race game, that's how we could do an export there. So now I've got my number and I want to set that value. So what I can do is actually drag that number straight out of there, and in this case I got GetMyNumber. So by default, by dragging, you have the getter, but if you look down here at the bottom, it says hold control to drop a variable setter. So if I hold down the control key and drop, I get the setter. So it says setMyNumber. So what I can do is take this and drag it right there, and that should set my number. And then I can do that right there to connect. So the first thing that will run is this randomize, and the next is the setMyNumber. Now I've had some issues getting these to work. In theory, you should be able to type 1 here and then 10 here, and it should work, but I've not had good luck with that. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to print the number that comes out so that we can see what the value is. Another thing to note is if I take this number right here, we'll come back to this in just a second. If I take this number right here, this will actually generate two different numbers. It'll generate one for the set number and another one for the print number, so that's not actually that useful. What I really want to do is print the value of this variable. So it seems weird that here's the variable right here, and I have to do another block in order to get that same variable, but it's just the nature of a getter versus a setter. Okay, so now if I run this, I need to select a main scene, and I get a number down here, and it's 0. And I notice this, these don't seem to be applying, and I'm not sure why. It may be a bug, because I'm still using the beta of Godot, but there's a way around it, and it's not too hard. So we want a constant is what we want, what these really are. So these are like typing a number up at the top of your code and calling it a constant. And what you can do is click on it and then set the type. So these I need floats to come in, and I'm going to do 1, and I'm just going to duplicate. I'm going to click on it and duplicate it, and then this one I need 10. And I'll just drag those numbers right there. And that does seem to work. So right here I got 1.42. So what happened was it generated a number and then set it in here, and I'm not sure why it accepts it here, even though it should be of type integer, and it doesn't complain. So what we're going to do is, just like we had to do in code, we had to convert it to an integer. And if you type int all the way down at the bottom, you have these, and it's just like typing the code for that. It takes, and you can highlight multiple blocks, by the way, and then move them around. So it takes a float and then converts it to an integer, and that'll cut off that extra period part. So now I get a nice whole number between 1 and 10. So there's 7. Next time I get 9. Next time I should get something else. 1. Very good. So this is how you set up your random number and stuff it into this variable. Alright, so next let's take care of our button click. So I'm going to go to my button, and just like before I go to Node, Signals, and Button Pressed. I'm going to double click it, and here I have the option to go ahead and add that to my control script. So I'm going to connect. And now here under my functions I have that new on button pressed. So this is the code that will run when the button's clicked. And we can prove that by doing a nice print function. And drag that in, connect it. And here for the value, I don't think I can type something there. Yep. So we need to pass something in. So I could use a constant and just type something in here by setting this to a string and then say like hello world. And drag that over to my print function, and now when I click my button it should say down in the bottom here hello world. There we go. So each time I click my button it says that. Alright, so just like before, we want to compare that random number, which is my number, to the result, or excuse me, the input text box here, its value, and then if it's equal to, we'll let them know that they guessed the right number. So this is probably where this visual scripting really is nice. Instead of having to access this property by getting this node, saying like get node control, then get node input text edit, and then take the text property, all I have to do is come over here and drag that in and drop it. Now this is the set text, and just like before, if you noticed when I'm dragging this down here at the bottom, it says I can get the setter, the getter, the setter, or a generic signature. So in this case I want to hold down control, and that'll get me my get text. And that's as easy as it is to get the text out of that property and then get it into my code. So that's actually really nice. So what was I going to do? I was going to do a compare, right? So we're going to do a condition. And so a condition is your if statement. You've got 3 outputs. You've got a true, a false, and then done just means after this condition is handled, always do this one. Okay? So you notice this is a string, and this is just looking for a Boolean. So it wants us to figure out what Boolean expression happens before we even get into this condition. So what I need to do is I can drag, let's see, this gets the text, but I need to convert the text into a number. So I'm going to do just like I did with the other one. I'm going to do the int function. Down here there's one for a string. So I'm going to drag that in, takes a string, and I get an integer out. Now also you probably noticed a couple times I dragged it out and dropped, and it wants to create one based on the type of value that I've got coming out. So in this case I wanted to say compare equal, and that'll give me my A equals B. You could also come over here and do equal and drag that in, and I get the same thing. So it's just a little shortcut version of getting there. So I'm going to take that A is going to be my this is the player's guess, and then I'm going to grab this guy, which is my variable, and that'll be the B that I'm comparing it to. So if these are equal, then this will be true, otherwise it'll be false. So this condition will say true, I want to do something, and what would I like to do? So I want to set the text to the result label. So I'm going to click the result label, and up here on text I can drag that in and get a set text. So in this case I'd like to set that text, and I need to know what I want to set it to. We can try and use this. Let's see if this works. So you guessed my number. Close. Let's see if that works. Again, I've been having some fishiness with the... So the number is 4, so let's go ahead and type that in. Yeah, so I'm getting empty. I'm not sure what's up with these. I may be using them wrong, but or it may just be a bug. But like I said, we can pass in a value here. So let's make it constant and drag it in. We'll make it of type string, and we'll set the value to you guessed my number. Alright, and we'll drag that value up here, and there we go. So now let's try it, and the number is 6, so I'll put that in there. You guessed my number. Awesome! So this works, and the next one we need to do is if you guess too high. So we need another one of these conditions. I'm going to scoot that out of the way. Scoot this over here, do another condition. So this is if the number is too high. So I need another condition block, so let's go ahead and grab this one down here, and this time we'll do greater. Okay, so we'll drag this number over, and then we'll drag that into the condition block. So if that's true, then I'm going to set that text again. So I need to click on the result label, drag the text over, drag that onto true, because I want this to happen when the true happens. We're going to set that text, and I need another one of these constants. I'll just duplicate that to save myself some trouble, and I'll change this to your guess was too high. Okay, and I need another one for, and we'll connect that to the done. I need another one for too low. So again, we need a less than. Drag that value there, and you guys see what I'm doing here. I've got I'm always taking this number up here, which is the player's number, and I'm putting that into A on all three of these, and then the B is coming from this guess my number, or get my number is going into the B in each of these, and then the output goes into the condition. So again, I need this, and I'm actually, this time I'm going to grab both of these, hit Control D, and that'll duplicate both, and I'll just drag them both down. Set that to the true, and the value there, and I need to change the text of this to say too low. Alright, so let's give our game a try. I think this should work. I think we got it all going. So I'm going to start with 5. That's too high, because my number is 1. If I go 2, still too high. If I go 1, guess my number. Let's try again, see if we get one that's too low. Alright, so if I try 1, too low. 3, still too low. 4, guessed my number. And if I go up to 6, too high. Alright, so we did it. We replicated Guess My Number, and we did it all with visual scripting without typing a single line of code. We were able to replicate the whole game. So that's really awesome. The downside is this is really huge, right? So this is a lot of stuff, and this is just the button press. We've also got this stuff from the ready function. So visual scripting is not perfect. If you needed to write some really complicated logic, you would end up with a really, really massive layout here. You can zoom out, but then you can't read what's going on. So it's nice for having kind of an overview of what's going on, but it's not so great for actual using it in this way. You can zoom in, and then this 1 in the middle resets it to default, where it's nice and readable. You can also turn off the grid snap, so that these things can smoothly move around instead of snapping to the grid. So it's just a preference there. You can also collapse these into functions. So I actually went through the exercise of moving each of these kind of 3 segments into their own function, and that made it a lot more visually readable, but it was also a lot of work. So you kind of have to balance what you're doing there. So anyways, we may look at visual scripting a little bit more in the future. I thought it was really interesting, and let me know what you think down in the comments. Alright, thanks. Bye.